Hey everybody, time for the Surf and Turf Show. Good morning everybody, and welcome to the Surf and Turf Show. With me as always is my good friend Adam. Adam, how are things?
Hello, my friend. It is hot here in Western New York. It's like, we were complaining about being cold 2 weeks ago, and now it's hot, like it's hot in the South, and people are complaining about it.
What does hot mean in upstate New York? You're not in upstate, but what is up? I guess everything's upstate New York. You're not in the city. So
hot
what
in
is
upstate New York is 90. So obviously that is a different layer of hot than, like a Baghdad hot.
So nothing's like Actually, nothing's like Kuwait. Baghdad is hot, but to me, Baghdad was comparable to like Phoenix or, East Texas. But man, Kuwait. What is it about Kuwait that makes you feel like you're standing under a hand dryer in a bathroom, and that's where you live? You live under a hand dryer in a bathroom.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like. God, it's so hot.
And then I think what was crazy was like you could detect a difference between like 120 and 110, and then like 110 and 100. You're like, oh, it's cool today.
I become like a sommelier of hot, terrible desert weather. Like I don't know, the wine is red. Oh no, you live in Kuwait a little bit, you'll know. It's 122 today. It's just, you get that little special zest that comes from it being only 110. You're like, I feel perky, man. I could run all the way to Chapel.
I need to put on a light jacket.
Oh man, the place. But even that's not as bad to me as Qatar. There was something special about the air base in Qatar because it was like this perpetual halfway house. I don't know your experiences there. Maybe a PCS there and had a great time. But for me, it was always a place to fly through. And so every time I went in, I was in like transient barracks. And transient barracks are, just this big tent where somebody is always turning the lights on at inappropriate moments. Like there's no ability to get a good night's sleep because you're just living this perpetual like purgatory.
Somebody's like chainsawing a tree down next to the tent for whatever reason.
And there's no trees. I mean, it's a desert, but somehow they're running this chainsaw
why
back.
Is that happening? Yeah.
We're just doing quickie saw rehearsals next to the sleep tent. Meanwhile, you have to get up every 6 hours to go to the air terminal because anybody, I guess, who's not familiar with military flights, you don't get like a ticket at a time. You get kind of this priority list. And hey, I'm number 3 on the list. So that means every time a plane comes in, I have to show up to see if I get space on it. And every time you show up, they're like, nah, you didn't make the cut. So come back in 4 hours. You're like, just forever? Just come back every 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, and then it's like when you exist in that liminal stage, like nobody can make a definitive call. Like, hey, we're rolled 24 hours. So it's always just like 4 to 6 hours at a time. So people are just laying on the ground, like just passed out in a corner, like a hobo. And, like, at least if it was like 24 hours, you're like, okay, let's go somewhere. We can put our heads down, but you're just getting strung along. That was one of the first lessons I learned was like when you're deploying, like just be able to live out of your bag for like a week. Just, I like it. Yeah.
It's true. Like no matter what they tell you about how long the flight is or what, common sense would tell you about how long it takes an airplane to fly such distance, just assume that it's going to be a solid week. Assume you're going to get hung up somewhere and that you're not going to make it. And it's just rough because you can go from being in charge, like of, you're the commander, you're important, you can make calls, make decisions. And then you go to like Qatar. Nope. Ain't in charge there. You're just a dude, a passenger hoping that someone will take pity on you and fly you into the country where you're trying to go.
Just passing through.
Think there's any legends? Like, are there urban legends about people who spent, like 3 years in Qatar waiting for a flight out? I never heard one of those, but it makes you wonder, like is there like stuck, like the terminal, like the guy from the terminal, but
yeah,
the Qatar
I was going to say like
the
Tom Cruise. Yeah. The Tom Cruise movie. Yeah. Like it's like a weird, like reservist and people forgot about him. He wasn't, his chain of command back at home just kind of forgot about him. They demobilized, like nobody overseas was tracking him. So he was just in there. Yeah. He was just there. Like he's he gets a part-time job in the DFAC. He's like working there.
Or like a poor guy from like El Salvador, because we had a lot of allied forces come through there at one point. And you can imagine one of those dudes who like, went to use the crapper and his unit left. And then he came out. He's always like, he doesn't exist. He doesn't exist in the system. He just kind of dwells on Qatar. He's just there. He's on the airbase now forever. Like,
I mean, you could probably make a living there on the edges. You could get food, get laundry.
I mean, if
You
they
could.
let you into the chow hall, you're good, and you could probably work out some kind of basic service economy with the other transients. I'm sure you could too. So you probably make good money. Maybe you could get a comedy routine during an MWR night. You go stand up and do a little stand up comedy. I don't know.
Yeah, just like hustle spades. Something.
Hustle spades. Does anybody still play spades? That was like the game. That was the game
Yes.
of early
Oh,
deployment.
absolutely.
Is it still a thing? Do
Yeah.
kids still do that, or are they just
I
like
mean, I think it
phones or
is. I
something?
mean, I'll talk to people because like it's big on like Navy ships, and I've seen it big, with the Army too. So, yeah, I would say spades is still a thing.
Maybe so. Maybe so. It wasn't big in like staffs. I don't know. We just mostly walked to the chow hall and griped a lot. I think griping
It's
was the
because
equivalent of spades for like field grades.
no, because you've forgotten your dirty enlisted man time.
You're probably right. That was probably it. It was probably just forgotten. I should have been playing like squash, croquet, or something. I don't know. What the hell are you supposed to play when you're an officer? If not spades, bridge? Maybe bridge? Is that classy spades?
I think you're supposed to run like long distances. So you should
That's
do like
true.
adventure races or something. Yeah.
At what, Bagram? Like you get like just sucking dust down
yeah.
for 84 miles as you run in a little
that's
circle.
not no.
Oh my
That
god.
way you could like row like 50,000 yards. I don't know, something.
Absolutely, you're right. Rowing was 100% the thing. And you're like, I wonder how rowing at Bagram, and this is a tangent, right? But I wonder how using the row machine at Bagram stacks with like the burn pit registry for the VA. Like, I feel like you should be able to take your little transcript of miles rode as you like sucked in the air inside those hangars with just like the radioactive dust, and you could turn that log into the VA and say, hey, check it out, man. I did my staff time at Bagram. You guys got to square up with me when I get lung cancer.
Yeah, if you had like Garmin data or like Strava data, yeah, you could like present it like, hey, listen, I was breathing in at 3 times the rate of, the pogue that like wasn't working out.
Exactly. It's funny you mentioned the Garmin data. Have you ever pulled your Google phone data? Like, I don't know if you have an Android phone or an Apple. You an Apple or you an Android guy?
I'm a full-on cultist, my friend.
So you are. So we are enemies. We can no longer speak civilly to
We
one another.
we actually, in fact, are mortal foes. That's
It's
correct.
good that we do this at a distance, or we'd have to fight to
We
the
had to
death
get
like
this.
Kirk and
We got to
Spock.
get this out in the open. Yes.
But
absolutely.
so maybe there's an equivalent on Apple. I'm sure there is because Apple has all of your information forever. But on the Android side, Google has all of mine, right? It's just who gets to steal our data. But if you pull the Google Tracks and just go into like your travel section on your phone and just see like, all right, Google, where have I been for the last 10 years? It's pretty shocking, the data that will actually pull up. You're like, oh, wow, you were with me the whole time. It's like the never ending story. Like every step I took through the book, there you were. It's
wild too.
places.
Yeah. Because even if you put it on like airplane mode, a lot of those apps will still track your location data. And then when you connect back to the internet, they'll like transmit it back out to their, to their parent apps.
I was shocked at exactly how much stuff it had recorded over the various, different SIM cards, different lots of stuff, but the device, unless you swap out the device fully, like it's definitely on to you. Now it just makes for a funny conversation piece, but at the time, probably like a horrifying OPSEC problem that we should probably be more aware of. But
well, yeah, we basically just have a low jack that we're constantly walking around, and anybody can really, with probably some over the counter, commercial software, can get a very quick idea. And then none of that data is like illegal. Like anybody can go, you have like a what's it called, an ad ID number associated with your device. That's not like your MAC address or your SIM card. But it's like this unique identifier for all your apps. So anybody can like buy your data and then like just see whatever you're up to. That's not illegal.
So it's funny, right? My son, he's left the house, and my oldest boy, and he does cybersecurity now. And so he's super privacy conscious, very privacy conscious about how he puts his stuff together. So he took one of my old computers and he reformatted it, like straight back down to the motherboard, right? Took it all apart, cleaned the whole thing out, put it back together, runs Linux on it, doesn't even run Windows, like just buried this thing in like as invisible as you can make it. He had to go stay on military lodging for some reason a couple of weeks ago. The second he walked in and connected to Wi-Fi, I was like, hey, Daniel, how are you? And it just blew his mind. He was so irritated because even then, even stripped down to the base hardware, there's something about the device ID that still is recognizable even through all of the layers of obfuscation. How horrifying is that from privacy point of view?
So is that like, was he running like Ubuntu or like what was he was just running the Linux operating software?
Yeah, I don't know which version of Linux he runs because you've just
So
escaped my or exceeded my tech knowledge. But yeah,
that's
100%.
wild though, because you would not think that those settings would stay in like a different operating system.
No, I mean, in theory, like the whole language is different, right? It would be like me walking in and speaking Chinese instead of American, but somehow they're still like, oh, it's you. Your voice, something about you still penetrates all of that and is recognizable to this basic Wi-Fi router, which is
So it
amazing.
must be the MAC address. It must be the MAC address then stays the same.
I don't know. I'm sure he could tell you because I'm sure he researched it
Yeah.
and dug into it. But for me, it was just like this amazing, like, man, you could put a lot of effort into privacy. You could put a tremendous amount of resources toward it and still absolutely be,
Mm.
you know, visible. Although I guess to its credit, it still thought it was me and not him. So maybe that's something.
Mm.
Anyway, fascinating
Yeah.
stuff, man. Fascinating stuff. It is a super interesting field that I do not know a whole lot about.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you
Yeah,
do.
and it only grows more. Well, no, I don't. I would not say. I think I'm aware of it because it's like it's a privacy issue for all of us, and I think we are behind corporations significantly, and the lawmakers are behind corporations significantly in terms of like protecting our own data. I think we're just kind of in the wild west of data right now, and we need some more. We need like a bill of rights to kind of protect our individual data.
Curious. I'm curious to see where legislation finally catches up with that. I feel similar with drone warfare. Like this is how to my
Mhm.
refresh my brain just because I just went to a conference last week and briefed on ethics, and we talked a lot about drone ethics, and this seems similar to that in that basically it's just uncharted waters. You're like, well, there's a lot of stuff here. We're not totally sure about the implications of it. We know what we can do and what we are doing, but we're not necessarily clear on like maybe what the right answer is. And
Mhm.
data aggregation does seem to be kind of similar that way.
So let's talk about what did you present at the conference?
So it was the International Society of Military Ethics, and I am not a professional ethicist, but did a lot of time in special operations, and I have some. We call it a pet project, right? We all have those things that we're just enthusiastic about. So I decided to submit to see if I can go present, and they accepted my submission. And so it was one of the probably 30% practitioners who were there, as opposed to maybe 70% academics. And basically, I just pitched on special operations ethics. We went and talked about some of the challenges the community has, and we talked about some of the long term consequences of, let's say, operating in a really morally gray environment are on kind of the individual. Like I think it takes its toll on people to be operating around the margins of what is acceptable for a long time. And I think dudes tend to come home maybe with a slightly busted moral compass, I think. I don't know what your experience is, but that's been mine.
Yeah, there was a scene in Zero Dark 30 where like the CIA guy comes out and he's talking and he's like, I need a vacation. I've been looking at uh too many Iraqi asses. And it was like this and it was kind of it was talking about our whole detainee program and enhanced interrogation. It was kind of portraying that side of our experience in these wars and in the early 2000s, and I thought it was that was a flavor quote that kind of captured I think feelings from that time period, I would say.
Yeah, that's it. It's. I think you look at kind of the accumulated like damage that causes, like just this. Imagine doing something, I guess, to present it in a way that people don't understand. Like, imagine doing something just disgusting, and you had to do something like being a coroner, maybe. Like if you wanted to kind of imagine like just doing this thing that you kind of find inherently repugnant, but they get used to it, and then imagine after a year of doing that, and then you did it for 20 more years, how used to it you would be, and how being that used to it might kind of taint your humor, your personality, your kind of interpersonal interactions. And that's just being a coroner, which is at least morally a fine thing. It's just a little distasteful. Now imagine if you were doing that with enhanced interrogation, or I don't know, breaking into people's houses and shooting them, or all of the many other more questionable activities that the soft community engages in. And then just think about how that would impact you as a human, and your ability to kind of recognize maybe right from wrong, and and respond to situations normally. And so that's what we're talking about. Moral injury, right, is the, I think, technical term for it. We're trying to
Yeah,
talk through
and
that.
so I can't find my copy of Gray Zone Ethics, so I'm like, I'm think I'm just gonna have to buy it again because I'm not sure if I just read it on like Kindle or what I did.
I'll mail
But
you one,
I
man.
think
I'll mail
you're
you one.
no. I got to support support the independent authors out there. But so I really like your framing of it as, the kind of the marksmanship aspect, and then the insight that this is something that we need to train and we need to rep, so that people, they get a sense of, they have like kind of like a home base area. So when they start kind of floating away on these deployments that we're asking them to do for the nation, then they kind of know where home base is. They can kind of like get back to it. Anyway, so I think that's a great insight of your book is the importance of kind of recentering ourselves and like and training kind of the moral domain.
It's important, right? It's important. I think, to me at least, it really was brought to a head when we were talking about, I mean, I worked in a strike bridge for a while on one deployment where we were actually, doing drone strikes. And it's strange. Like, I was deployed, so it's a little different, but a lot of those drone operators work out of functionally their house, right? They go to work in, whatever state. They drive to work, they run drones for 12 to 16 hours, and then they drive home. But I don't think people appreciate exactly what drone warfare looks like. I mean, you're flying this drone around. So if you're the FPV, the full motion video, monitor guy, you sit there and watch drone footage. So you're watching this slow flying airplane that flies at thousands of feet, and it's just watching a person because you're probably developing a target on this person. So you have to watch this person for a long time to, figure out their pattern of life and figure out what they're doing right and wrong. And are they a bad guy? And then you watch that person through high res video, like interact with their family. You watch them like play with their kids. You watch them, not really pat their dog because at least Afghans mostly didn't have dogs, but you watch them, hang out, laugh with their friends. And then when you get the call, then all of a sudden you shift gears from like, okay, we're going to kill this person. And then you just wait for that person to achieve the necessary level of separation from those family members, right? Because you don't accidentally blow up civilians. So you're like, all right, when he's 10 meters away, we're going to shoot a missile at him. He's going to die. And you just watch and you wait. And then you click the button, and then the guy goes out to take a dump, and then he explodes. And then you have to confirm that he's still alive or that he's dead. And so you have to just watch while his wife and kids run out and see the flaming wreckage of their, father, husband. And then you pan to the next guy and you start the cycle over again. And to me, there was something so uniquely kind of awful about that I had to think about what the impacts of that would be on the person who had to do it. Because I was one of those people, right? Like, and there are people who do it for their whole profession. And I could not get past how horrible it was. And it's, anyway, so now let's talk about it. We talk about hobbies, right? We talk about trying to do our part to fix the world. For me, that's one of the things I would like to do to fix the world. It's just to kind of expose people to the realities of it, because I think drone warfare gets viewed as a very easy solution, like this kind of low cost, hey, it's great, right? No risk. We just blow people up. I just want people to appreciate how horrible it actually kind of is, and how taxing it is on the people who have to do it, because it's uniquely weird to me. I don't know what your experience with it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's probably similar to yours. I was never a staff in a strike cell, but I was definitely on, task forces, as like, ground force commander of an element. And then that was all, going along around me, throughout my deployments. And so, yeah, you see how we try to create a process to scaffold this thing, that's, ethical and legal, with the layers of approvals and the different things that we do with JAGs, the lawyers, and then
The pillars.
the various,
Yeah.
the components, and then, our plan to make it as, minimize non-combatants as possible. But yeah, you're right. It's a very, to be on the other end of that process would be terrifying. So, I mean, there's like definitely there's a process that we try to go to make it as like ironclad as we can, but it's definitely not perfect. So, and I don't know, but I don't know what the answer is, like what the alternative is. Is the alternative like more non-combatants are getting killed? Like, I don't, cause I think if we, like, so let's say we did away with it, like what would the model we went to, in lieu of that, would that be more of a baseball bat rather than like a scalpel. Like, I don't know.
No, it's true. And you get why drone warfare emerged and you see the value of it because it is surgical, to use this, continue your scalpel analogy. It's surgical in a way that nothing else in history has ever been for the identification of a bad guy and killing him. And so I get it. One, it's low risk, so friendly guys don't die, right? No friendlies are at risk at all. Two, it's weirdly low cost from an enemy point of view. Like you are killing exactly the thing you mean to kill with relatively, not even relatively, but really few mistakes, right? It's super accurate. The people that die are the people we mean to kill, and there nobody else really gets killed with relatively few exceptions. But there's still something kind of horrible about it. And I think to me, this is just total speculation, but I don't know how to quantify this, but to me, the complete removal of friendly risk, and actually, Brad Strausser wrote a book.
Yeah, I was trying to find his book. I can't find his book. I know I have it somewhere.
He'll have to reference it. He had a co-author or contributor that talked about this, but there's a kind of, let's say that there is some kind of nobility in like person-to-person combat in war. I'm not saying it's a glorious thing in war. I'm just saying that there is some value, some positivity to be found in this kind of like striving, putting yourself at risk to defeat an enemy or country, to protect it. Like there's some kind of, we talk a lot about doing hard things. There's some kind of value, nobility to that. And drone warfare, I think, to me, maintains a lot of the bad. Like we're still just waxing people. We're still killing people. There's still occasional collateral, but it just takes away all that good. Like whatever good there is in war, I feel like drone warfare kind of saps it and takes it away and makes it robotic and kind of soulless. I don't know. I mean, that's just me talking.
So I struggle with that because to me, when I think of like war, it's like, you're trying to get advantages over your adversaries and they have their own, asymmetrical advantages on us. So like, is your feeling like, you remember in Last Samurai when like, Tom Cruise is a samurai and they're like charging and then there's like a Gatling gun just like mowing them down. And it's like, okay, is that sporting? Is that fair? Like, no, but that is what we have now, on the battlefield. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like, there's no, just like, the U.S. get involved in Iran. It's like, there's people that are like, have big feelings either way, but it's like, there's drawbacks to each course of action. So I think abandoning drone warfare, are we then just ceding that capability to adversaries?
And you're right. I'm not saying that's not, there's no easy answer with that. I mean, people said the same thing when the machine gun came out and how it was just kind of this soulless weapon that, turned battle into butchery and like, where's the nobility in this? Like, there's nothing glorious about it. It's just people slogging around in the mud and getting killed like pigs. But maybe that's just kind of the way war works. And maybe it's always just kind of a race to the bottom, right? I mean, maybe in the end, it's just this kind of soulless business. But it just, in my career, in my little slice of that trajectory, it seemed really noticeable to me when I went from like us driving around and trying to like find people and close with them. And it's like this challenge and we're trying to, succeed, to just, we're watching them on a screen and they blow up and then we go blow up the next guy. And it's just, something felt like it was kind of lost, but again, whatever, we're not going to give it up because it has a lot of practical advantages.
Yeah. But then there's like the economic side of it too. So there's like the morality of it. And then there's like the economics of it. And it's, is this a sustainable business model to like, talk about the hours of ISR and then, the cost of the munitions? Like we can't afford to do this, indefinitely.
You don't think $20,000 for a donkey is reasonable? Well, maybe a re-engage, because donkeys weirdly have this magical ability to dodge missiles. Don't know why, but they hear those things coming and can leap out of the way in a way that their owners do not. And
they have good instincts, man.
They have the force. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe it's some Jedi shit. Maybe just being a donkey in Afghanistan is hazard enough that you just get like this sixth sense for staying alive. But those guys are amazing at dodging rockets. And then you get to this like, well, we re-engage. I mean, in theory, it's a cache of weapons on the donkey. You're like, it's $20,000 missile. It's like an $8 donkey with 4 AKs on it. Like maybe that's a bad math problem. Maybe just let the donkey go. He survived. He gets to live. Good job, buddy.
Yeah, man, that's tough, man. There's no easy answers to it, and and then now we're gonna start to see this technology percolate. It's already domestically with law enforcement, not so much the munition side, but, Yeah, I mean, looking at well, and looking at just examining the battlefields now with the FPV drones, and with cables, those things will go like 8 kilometers on a cable. So it's like there's no way to jam them. So you just have to basically, I've seen these like MRAPs with like giant chain link, around them, because they're trying to foil those things, but I mean, they're really like, if that stuff comes domestically, it's definitely going to significantly change the character of people's everyday lives.
It's it's horrifying to think of bad guys using it domestically. It's awfully easy to produce. It seems like only a matter of time until people are going to use it at least periodically. But and honestly, I'm equally horrified about the idea of good guys using it domestically, right? Like, I mean, I imagine that SWAT teams will eventually hit the same risk calculus that the military did. Like, well, if I'm going to raid the house anyway, a drone is a safer way to do it, and the collateral damage is lower. So why wouldn't I do it? But then you're like, I don't want armed drones flying over the states, and so I really hope we can draw the line on that. Say, nah, man, no, just never do it. But
I mean,
I,
they already did it with like a robot, I think, somewhere in Texas, like, I don't know, 5 years ago. They clacked off a drone, like a robotic, like dude, like an EOD thing. They clacked it off on a dude, I think in a parking lot building, or parking complex.
don't like it. Would very much like to see hard and
Mm.
fast rules about that, even if it increases the risk to, military and law enforcement people. I get it. I don't think that that's an easy thing to say. And I obviously people are like, what, you want more police to die? Like, I hate to say it, but to me, that's a trade that I think I would have to make as a society. Like, I mean, just to keep those out of
Yeah.
the skies, I think armed drones over the states is just too terrible. It's just too horrible a thing to let in, no matter what it does for us. I don't
Yeah.
know.
So now you're talking about like, kind of like the risk calculus, that we normally did, the triangle between like civilians, enemy, and then like, your own forces. So then you're talking about assuming more risk on your own forces in order to prevent, you know, I don't know, just the militarization of our cities with armed drones.
Exactly. And I mean, it's not easy to say that, but I feel like that's the right answer. But again, this getting kind of dark, man. It's got a little dark, but I feel like our conversation kind of went that
Yeah,
way. But
man.
that's where
How
that's
did
where
this?
my
What?
that's what my brain was, man. This ethics conference. You go up there and you hear some
Yeah,
stories, and you hear
yeah.
talking, you get going, and it's just a lot to cover. But we don't got to dwell on that forever. Let's switch to a more cheerful topic. All right, let's switch to a more
Oh,
cheerful topic because nothing
let's
else
do it.
exciting happened this weekend, right? Like we're
So I
so
was I actually I went to a concert Saturday night, and
Megan Roney.
I'm
Did you
not
go to a
like a
Megan
big
Roney concert?
no, it was Goose. Goose is kind of like a fish. They're kind of like a fish like jam band, and
Single
so
name
I
animal
go to the
band. Single
concert,
name animal band.
just just chilling, having a great time. I brought my phone. I don't normally like, I try not to have my phone on me, but I'm like, all right, I'm in a concert scenario. Like, I should probably have my phone. And then I just happen to like, I'm like waiting for the bathrooms, and I'm like, just take a quick look, and I'm like, oh, we bombed Iran on Saturday night. Like,
Yeah. Were
all
you
right.
were you were you on LSD at this time at the Not Fish concert,
No,
Adam? I just want to ask this
I
question.
was not on LSD at the Goose concert, but I was, it definitely like put a damper on the events.
Oh man, it's I too was surprised at some point this weekend when I picked it up. Like, whoa, I gotta recheck. Did I misread that? The answer appears to be no. Um, yeah. So obviously, we bombed the nuclear sites in Iran. Full disclosure, like let's lay our biases on the table. Before we talk about this, I actually have no love for the regime in Iran. Like, I feel like Iranian money and technical expertise killed a lot of my friends in the GWAT, like directly, like on the ground through, explosively formed penetrators and, through Quds Force backed operations. So I actually really not a fan of Iran, as far as a global power. I don't really give them a fair shake or think that they have, a lot of, moral standing, but, I just wanted to lay that out. Say, yeah, I'm not a fan. So as we talk this through, people will know where I stand on the issue.
Well, so let's do like, let me do some like throat clearing context background real quick. So, obviously the Iranian people are amazing. Like they're just awesome people. They've been around for thousands of years. They've very like, long storied, culture.
The Persians,
And
like
then
since the Persian Empire.
y-
Yeah.
yes, yes. And so what happens in the past, like I just want to like characterize this because I'm not sure how many people are like tracking the history of our relationship with Iran. So I want to make sure we kind of like lay it out clearly for people. So in 1953, they had a very popular prime minister named Mossadegh, and we engineered, a coup against him. The CIA did, and they removed him from power. The Shah was not super popular, but we wanted him to kind of be the power in that country, and there's oil going on, there's all that going on. But everything kind of builds to a head, amongst the larger systemic movements in the Middle East of kind of Arab nationalism. And then that percolates to Iran, to the Persians. And then they, end up, the Shah flees the country. Khomeini takes power in 79, takes the hostages. And all of that is like, they're pissed off at us because we interfered in their internal affairs, which, to me is like kind of a reasonable thing. Like they're like, yo, let us manage our own business. So that's kind of the backdrop of like a lot of this, right? Like 53, we depose Mossadegh, and then 79 is obviously the revolution. They capture, they embarrass Carter. We have Desert One. They're kind of back channeling, talking to Reagan before he's elected. Then we get into like Iran Contra in the 80s. And then, but to your point about, killing a lot of your friends. So I can remember being a kid, when learning about the Beirut bombing in 82, I think it was, where 241 Marines were killed. And that was all, we intervened in Beirut. We were taking sides when the militia fights, but Iran was like, has been making moves on the world stage since the 80s. They've been behind a lot of, a lot of the stuff that happens behind the scenes, 80s, 90s, 2000s, like it was them, right? And you reference like, we had the whole like explosively formed penetrators, those like, just very deadly IEDs were being manufactured in Iran and brought over the border. So they've been like a long-term kind of like, they've been an actor in the Middle East, trying to frustrate our efforts, right or wrong, whether you agree or disagree with that. Like they've been behind the scenes trying to like throw sand in our gears as we try to like, nudge the region towards, policy outcomes. They've been there to like, not do it, and obviously they were like, funding Hamas, they're funding Hezbollah through Syria. And then now we have this like insane moment in history where all of their weapons have been like taken away. So they're like, Hamas has been taken away, Hezbollah has been taken away, Assad in Syria is off the table. And now, and they're like, air defenses have been taken away. Right. So like they are kind of in a situation of vulnerability that they really haven't been in since 79.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all true, right? It's good to provide that context and to see why we are where we are. The only two things I would add context wise are, one, they are like geopolitically, when you look at, global influence in the Middle East, they are Russia's main in that region, right? And so it's hard to not look at the, Iran in the Middle East as kind of an Iran-Russia axis, whereas, Saudi Arabia, Israel, Jordan, more US focused axis. And so you end up in these kind of rivalries, right? And Iran is certainly, like you said, you're talking about things that's had taken away. A lot of Russian support has obviously been taken away recently. And then you would say maybe even Iranian support has helped keep Russia afloat in Ukraine. If you look at some of like the back and forth with drones and other pieces of gear. So I think important to also look at that in terms of, why we might have done or not done things. But the other part that's interesting to me is we look at the balance of power religiously in the Middle East. And so we talk about why we got where we are. We talk about what why Iran doesn't like us and why we've been squabbling for a long time. But obviously the GWAT was one more thing of us spending 20 years kind of meddling in, Islamic affairs. If you want to look at it that way, I think probably they'd view it that way. But it gets a little more complicated than that because you get to the split internally in Islam. I mean, there's a lot of splits. It's a big, complicated religion, right? But Sunni and Shia. Iran is the, I think, largest and wealthiest supporter of kind of the Shia side of, Islam. And I believe that would be a hard opposition to a lot of the Sunni countries in the area, like Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Iraq for a long time. And our involvement in Iraq was kind of this conflict point between those two, because Iraq was formerly Sunni led, but majority Shia. When we walked in, we toppled Saddam, who was Sunni. We kind of flipped that power structure and I think inadvertently enabled Iran to gain a lot of influence in Iraq. But at the same time, we were fighting a lot of the people they were backing, which is why you had a lot of that Iranian tech killing us back in the early O's. And so now, as we look at, I guess the way I would frame this conversation moving forward is like, okay, well, let's look at it a couple ways. One, let's look at where we think, how is this going to play out? Like, what are the different ways like we did it? All right, we bombed Iran's nuclear program. They're not going to have that trump card now. They've been working a long time to try and get it, in spite of, sanctions and everything else. They've just continued to push to try and weaponize nuclear material. How's that going to play out? Like, how's this scenario? Is Iran going to fall? If it falls, what happens? And what are the impacts on the region? Like, I think we talk that. To me, that'd be interesting. I would just like to hear your perspective on it, but, it'd be probably interesting to people in general to hear kind of that thought. So how is this going to play out? Israel obviously went to war full on. Then we go and take out Iran's nuclear sites, basically finish the job on that. What's next? What happens?
Yeah, and then real quick, I have to say, like, with religions, I'm kind of like a comparative religions guy. So like you have like monotheistic religions, and then you have like these like kind of dharmic religions. So like your Hinduism, and I would kind of lump in, some Buddhism, some Taoism, Confucianism. Like they're more like dharmic. They have like a different idea of like the divine. But the monotheistic side, right? 1.0 Judaism, 2.0 Christianity, 3.0 Islam. And they all kind of have this like Genesis root back to Abraham. And they're all mixed in the region. It's all like a thing. But then within Islam, within monotheism 3.0, you have this like Sunni Shia split that, went down in Karbala back in the day, which is like a place in Iraq. There was a big battle. There was this big battle over succession of Muhammad, basically, and like who should succeed him. And the Shias thought that Ali, the nephew, should succeed and have like religious leadership. And, kind of the Sunni like political players were like, no, kind of the Ummah, the community, should be like electing who they want to religiously represent them. They had a big battle in Karbala, and Ali was martyred. And that's kind of where the Shias kind of like take their genesis, right? And so I wouldn't say they're like Catholics, like that's kind of like not, but like they would be more Catholic-y, I would say, in that they like have this, they have more like religious structure than like the Sunnis. I don't know if that makes any sense. Like I'm trying to like equate them a little bit. Like they have a more, they have like archbishops and like, that kind of structure. But, so what happens here now? Yeah. So, I think, what was it, Ali Nasser? Somebody had a book called The Shia Revival, or like the Shia Crescent. I'm drawing a blank right now, but it was like 15 years ago. But basically talking about their kind of the rise of Iran and their power in the region. But now, I think it's too early to tell exactly what's going to happen. We have to let these things settle out. I mean, just last night we had, kind of the ceasefire talk going on, and we're kind of in this like delicate dance, right? Because, Israel's naming this operation Rising Lion, and you have, I think there's some thematic significance there with the Iranian people, and the symbol of the lion. So I'm not sure if that's like, like a propaganda thing that Netanyahu's doing to like signal to the Iranian people, like, hey, we want you to rise up, and throw off this regime, or what. But, I think that is like an implicit thing on the table. But, the messaging from America has been, we're not interested in the regime change thing. We are interested in degrading your nuclear capability. Now Israel really has two, they have different aims. Like they want to degrade. I mean, I think they want the regime gone, but if that can't happen, their goals are like, eliminate the nuclear program, and then eliminate the missile program. So like that's kind of like a little bit farther than the US's kind of stated goals on that. And then I think Israel is just in a place where it's like a combination of, socioculturally, they just had an incredibly traumatic event inflicted on them,
Mm-hmm.
where, the equivalent of like 40.
Sponsored by Iran.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. 100%. So I'm trying, like I try to tell people like what it would be like if that happened in America. It would have been like 40,000 Americans were killed in a weekend, and then however many thousands, it would be like thousands of hostages were taken. Like that would be the equivalent of the event in America that happened to Israel, just to try to give people a sense of like where like the Israeli psyche, like they're where they're at. So I think and then they have like this very right-wing government that's like not playing around at all. So I think they've just made the calculation like we can't really live in this neighborhood anymore with this like low grade, beef going on. Like you're putting dead animals in my mailbox, and like, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like at a certain point, they're like, we need to just sort this thing out, once and for all. And I think that's kind of the place they're at right now.
Yeah, I mean, to take that analogy a little further, it would be like living in the neighborhood with somebody who's putting dead animals in your yard, but also they're trying to assemble a machine gun in the garage. And you're like, I see all the indications that you would do worse if you could do worse. And so that's, I think, one of the, when you look at Israel's, kind of lines in the sand about the nuclear program and the missile program. I mean, it looks pretty pragmatic from my point of view. Like, it's hard to really argue that if Iran had nuclear weapons, they wouldn't occasionally, at some point they would use in Israel. Like, I could see why the Israelis would feel that. And so whether or not I love the idea of a giant bonfire in the Middle East, which is going to be a hot mess, like, for the whole globe. But aside from that, you can't really argue, I think, that Israel didn't have like a pretty serious threat that they were going to go after. I think the interesting part to me is like, okay, well, now if the U.S. weighs in on that, to me, it's like, okay, we go back to World War I, like Franz Ferdinand, Archduke, gets shot. It is now an Austrian-Bosnian problem. But the second you get Russia, you get France, you get Great Britain mobilizing and weaponizing, and you're like, okay, well, now how's everybody going to handle it? Because it takes the situation from essentially a two-party conflict. It says, all right, well, if the U.S. gets involved, then we're going to bomb. Okay, what does that mean now? Like, who else is going to necessarily get in? And we're maybe already on a little bit of a interesting footing with Russia, with Ukraine, right? I mean, obviously, we did everything short of, killing Russians directly there. And so you look at that and you're like, well, okay, this is another bit of maybe provocation. So how do you think that's going to go? What do you think? More parties going to weigh in?
Well,
is this going to expand?
Yeah. So the acronym I've heard getting thrown around was CRINC. So like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, as this kind of unspoken, kind of this like new axis power, right? And it's like, are they really? Are they not? There's kind of debate among, international security scholars as to like how robust this relationship is between the four of those, countries. We do know that, as you said, there was like Shahed, Iran was like sending drones, Shahed drones to Russia. We know North Korea's in the mix. We know that China's been backfilling Iran's, ballistic stuff. Like there is like kind of evidence of some of this stuff going on. So, yeah, like I've had an essay like in draft form for like 6 months. That's like, did World War III already start? Like asking it just like, because it's like, and that's the one thing, like, I taught a naval history course before I retired, and like you're seeing the entire like U.S. history, and then some prehistory, and you're seeing like, okay, there's a war, and then it's like, oh, just magically, like when we join, that's when we call it like World War or whatever, and it's like, so how would we know if it had actually kicked off, except in retrospect, unless there's like, okay, there's a Pearl Harbor, there's this event that serves as kind of a gate, but we're just kind of like, we're kind of moseying into it, like we're kind of like, we're easing our way in, and some of the stuff that we did with Russia was legit, like, stuff was getting fired from Poland. We really played with kind of the edges of like, us, U.S. service member using a system that is firing into Russia. We definitely move close to that edge. especially like under Biden, like we like, and there was a period in between the election and the inauguration where like we started going after it like in a very provocative way, and thankfully it didn't escalate further. But yeah, we haven't seen like a big Iranian response. We haven't seen a big response from these adversaries. I think what we do know, when I taught naval history, like you could clearly see that the United States goes through these periods of like robust shipbuilding, and then like they kind of go into like contractions. And some of it's like, the Army and Navy are like beefing for budgetary things and, programs and all this. But we're definitely in a period where we shrank down our infrastructure, capacity, both to create munitions and to shipbuild. And, we've definitely paid a price for that in our history, at various stages of American history. And I think we've realized that we're closing the gap now, but we have this window of vulnerability, I would say probably the next like 2 to 3 years, where we have like China has a relative advantage in the Pacific. And so I think they are looking, when you look at the war games they're doing around Taiwan, they're kind of like slowly encircling it. They're probing, they're getting closer. So I think the window for them in Taiwan is like the next 3 years. And then we will be kind of closing the gap with some capabilities there.
No, that's exactly right. You have to like zoom out the lens and look. Like when you zoom in, I wonder about a lot of things in terms of escalation. Like, okay, Iran has, a particularly advanced capability to support and execute terrorist style operations, right? Like Iran puts a lot of equity into we can conduct terrorist operations wherever. Like, I mean, you hear about sleeper cells, you hear this, blah, blah, yeah, I got it. But they however you want to skin that, they most certainly have the ability to kind of project force that way. So it doesn't look like U.S. force projection, right? They don't have like a huge navy that's going to come over and attack the U.S. They certainly have the ability to create, horrible terrorist situations, I think, reliably. And I think they show a willingness to do that. So I'm curious to see, one, in immediate escalation terms, is something like that brewing, right? I mean, they're going to shoot missiles at Israel. I got it. There's going to be stuff going on there. But is there going to be some other sort of retaliation that Iran's going to, kick off? And we'll see what happens with that. And when you zoom back out, you're like, okay, well, now let's talk about China and Taiwan. And let's talk about, the potential end of the Pax Americana. Like, so, okay, so if we do decide to invest heavily in the Middle East, we surge forces in there, we start pushing, a carrier strike group or two into that area to do things. And then we also want to counterbalance Russia and Ukraine. And so we're also pushing resources there. China could well sniff that as an opportunity to say, well, U.S. doctrine says they can fight 2 wars at a time. That's what we're kind of task organized to produce. Here's their 2 wars, sort of, plus or minus, that they're dealing with. I think we can get away with this. And so that, to me, when I look at like stability and how this affects the overall globe, I start thinking like, well, if you draw enough U.S. attention into one place, somebody might decide it's a good time to kick something off somewhere else. And to me, that's when you really start looking at World War III. Like functionally, like, okay, what is a world war? A war that is fought kind of across the world? Like, well, you got three theaters of combat that people are involved in. That might get spicy enough that people decide that, all right, let's kick them all off. Every regional conflict, we're rolling it out there. Let's do it. Everything in sub-Saharan Africa. Let's get the Falklands involved. Like, let's get the Argentina's going to seize them.
Well,
maybe Argentina, Chile gets to work. Like, you just never know.
And so that goes back to, Strauss and Howe and generations theory, and kind of like there's this, every 80 years, there's this great thing that happens because everybody that has the wisdom to tell us this is like a bad road to go down is like dying off. So there's like not enough voices that are like, bro, like this total war, and is like, no bueno. It's like, no, it's not good for anybody. Like,
this is going to be worse. Like, however bad you think now
way worse. Like,
it's going to be worse than
don't
that.
do it. Like, whatever you do, don't do a giant world war. And then like all those people are dead. So
they're all dead. Every one of them.
And well, so I think with this situation, we are the norms of the world like is kind of being reorganized or like reoriented. The post World War II order is kind of like, it's frail, it's fragile, it's breaking up these old agreements. And I think Trump knew that. And I think Trump, moreover, knows like that we can't do all these things, which is why like, he's taking heat for like pulling back from Ukraine, because he's like, yeah, man, like China is like my thing. And he's realized like, if we're sourcing Ukraine and now we're sourcing Iran, like I think he looks at like I think he probably looks at Iran and he's saying we're letting Israel do the heavy lifting here. We're just kind of coming in with like some exquisite capabilities on the back end, but there's no way. I shouldn't say there's no way, but I don't anticipate that Trump would be like committing like large volumes of forces. I don't think that's not his thing. And plus, like the country of Iran is like not a country to invade. It's like completely like mountainous. Like there's no like that is not like a thing that's going to happen.
That has
So
not
like
stopped
if
us
the
before,
Iranian,
Adam. That is not stopped us before. I hope we don't. Like, I hope that you're right. But
I
that
just
never stopped
I
us.
like
Afghanistan is not a country to invade. You can't even like drive things into the
yeah.
country without paying
So
terrorists to move
yeah.
in there for
Well, it's
you.
like
Like, it's,
you're gonna yeah you're gonna invade the country that's called Graveyard of Empires. Like that's
we're
your
doing it.
plan. Yeah. No,
Boom. We're
let's
going
do
in
it.
hot and heavy.
That sounds
Like,
good. Yeah.
oh, we don't have a
No.
good decision making track record. You're like, there's no way that guy's going to do the heroin. He definitely isn't going to do heroin. I'm like, Adam, we did the heroin.
Well,
We
no,
totally did
and
the
you're
heroin.
absolutely right. And so I think that's an example of like when you open the door of war, like you do not know what's behind that door. Like it could be
That's for
like a
sure.
little old lady like crocheting, or it could be like just a giant vampire that's about to just devour you. Like you don't know what's behind that door until you open it. So you're absolutely right. Like we've opened the door now. Like let's see what happens. But like, I mean, Iran's like initial response with these like missiles to Qatar, I'm a little like, I think they just kind of did that to like say they did
Yeah,
something,
you got to
but
do something, right? You got to do something. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, I'm not sure like what cards Iran still has to play that they like haven't played. Like that's what I don't know. And maybe that's like, I don't know what I don't know.
No, that makes sense. And obviously, I don't either, right? I mean, that we're going to find out. They're either cooking something up and they're really brewing it, but it takes a little time. And so they're going to shake their fist until it goes off. And then they're going to be like, yeah, I told you so. Or they got nothing. And they're just going to sit there and kind of flail a little bit and we'll see what happens. But I was actually reading this weekend on it. And one of the interesting dynamics to this for me, too, is I look at conflict as a way to galvanize the opposition. So I wonder, I have read a lot that suggests that Iran, and my wife pointed out to me, that suggests that Iran has been secularizing a good bit over the last 2 decades, like at the kind of grassroots movement. Like she told me about it, I was like, I got to go check this out. And it sounds like maybe they've been getting less zealous at kind of the personal level, like the top tier, the top crust is still kind of zealous and they kind of support this. But maybe the ground people were like, we're tired of this crap. We just want to live in a normal country. We're sick of all this craziness. You see indications that was happening, right? You've seen revolts, you've seen kind of movements that suggest people are a little sick of it. But does this maybe kind of push it back the other direction? Like, I wonder sometimes, like, well, there's nothing that's going to
Yes.
galvanize people faster than
Well,
shooting missiles at them.
and you've definitely seen like some incredible courage and heroism from like Iranian women that like they've been like tortured and murdered trying to protest the regime and trying to protest like the besiege, like the morality police there. And yeah, I've definitely like I've read all the stories about like all the secret parties where like they're kind of paying off the guards and they're having like Western parties
Mhm.
with music and like I mean, it's not really Western. It's just like a party,
But
but
it was still that way in
like
the
they're
70s, right? Like a
yeah,
flashback to what it was before kind of
yes,
choking conservatism took over.
yes. And so you're absolutely right. Like you pose the question, like, does this like unify the Iranian people behind the regime, or does it like calve them off and then they're like trying to usurp the regime? And you're right. Like it's mostly like older people that are supporting the regime. A lot of the younger people they want to join the world and they want to be like cosmopolitan and like part of like, the rest of the world.
It's hard to know. It's just hard to know which way that's going to go. Um, One of the other angles that I wonder about on this is, okay, so let's say that the regime topples in Iran. On its face, that's a super good thing for Israel because Iran is obviously the sponsor of a lot of the problems that Israel has. But when I look at it, I'm like, okay, so let's say Iran topples. Does that mean that the Sunnis kind of functionally win in the region? Like, okay, and if they win, what does that look like? I mean, there's still a lot of Shia people, but if all the governments are Sunni, like we saw that more before, like when Iraq was still Sunni. You saw a lot more of that. Okay, well now the Sunnis are kind of downtrodden, or the Sunnis are kind of on top, and the Shia are kind of downtrodden. Does that specifically what I'm looking at is does that eventually lead to more trouble for Israel? Like right now, I would say that you see most of the outreach from the Islamic world toward Israel, whatever, if you want to call it outreach, more from the Sunni side. I would say the Sunnis are more, at least on the surface, willing to work with Israel. I mean, you got Wahhabism, you got all the problems. I'm not saying that necessarily there, but by removing the Shia threat, does it actually allow this now homogenous entity to say, actually, Israel, we weren't fans all along. This is going to cause you more problems? What do you think? Total
So
speculation,
yeah,
man. We are totally guessing here. We're
well,
just talking
I mean,
about
I
this.
think, yeah, I think what we've seen, with what's his name, Jared Kushner, like, everybody was like, you know, shitting on this guy because he's just like a random like businessman that's like trying to involve himself, and and I'm definitely like, I tend to lean that way, but he did this Abraham Accords there, and they seemed to tighten the relationship between Israel and a lot of the Sunni countries, and I think they started building that, and I think that was a big part of Iran, like wanting, to push Hamas to do what they did on October 7th was, oh man, Israel's starting to normalize relationships with like Saudi Arabia, some of these countries, and we got to do something before it gets to, and then it's like a block of like, Jews and Sunnis against the Shias
Against
kind of
Iran.
thing going on.
Yeah. Which is wild.
And so, well, yeah, and then I think any like if the regime went, there would definitely be like a big vacuum there that would be a problem. And I think you and I have seen just exactly how that goes wrong when there's not a good plan for like what comes after. You're like, oh shit, like we broke everything. Like now what do we do?
I mean, the last time we gave Iraq to Iran, like with a bow on it, and we created ISIS. And so we had this like wonderful twofer of, oops, probably not what we intended to do. So if we
Yeah,
could not do that again, that would be super
right.
good. So, but I think
Well,
to your
yeah,
point earlier, that's in large part when you see Trump being super hesitant to do something more than just blow up the nuclear sites. Like that's where it comes from, right? That comes from, I hope, my
yeah,
hope is that comes from like a well-informed, like, okay, we just screwed this up over the last 2 decades. Let us not make the same mistake again. And my hope is that we got enough
yeah.
rationality up there that we're like, no, we're not going to do that again. We might screw something else
And
up, but this one, we got this one down.
yes, and I do think Trump, for all of his like bluster and like all this like big game that he puts out, like he tried to give the diplomatic process, like he was like, yo, like let's do it 60 days. Let's try to freaking make this happen. And then like Israel struck on the 61st first day. So I mean there was clearly like, hey, let's let a process, let's try to talk it out. And then they couldn't get to a place because you're just kind of in like an irresistible force, like immovable, like what is it? Immovable like
Immovable
object, right?
objects,
Like that's
immovable, yeah.
yeah, because you have that with like Iran and Israel, because it's like if the Iranian regime backs off the nuclear program, it's like they might as well just like just give up. Like that's their whole like part of how they cling to power is like that that program. So if they give that up willingly, like their kind of like justification for why they're in charge kind of just goes away. Um, so yeah, I think he, and and then the other piece that we didn't really talk about is like, the power of the executive at this point, like, people are criticizing him. Um, Congress should control that power, right? Like using military force. But like Congress has just basically shown itself like they're not willing to, like, they don't want those votes. Like, I guess now they're talking about doing a vote, but it's like, consistently over the last, like, I don't know what, 20, 30 years, they've been unwilling to exercise kind of their power. And they've just ceded that to the executive. And so like, he's just like, yeah, okay, then I'm just going to make moves.
So I think if we take, we don't talk politics on this show, and if we take all political discussion on it out of the mix, we just say, hey, one thing we should all as Americans be, I think, super concerned about is a congressional willingness to abdicate responsibility and basically just platform against whatever decisions are being made by whoever is in power, right? Take the last 4 presidents, 5 maybe presidents. I think we increasingly see Congress willing to just point their fingers at the president and say, well, yeah, this guy's terrible. Look what he's doing. He's such a horrible person, and running kind of against, but at the same time, advocating their own responsibility to kind of check that. And so I think again, whatever political stripe you are, we should all be disappointed in the idea that it's kind of become an executive function to wage war. And that sucks because that's not the way it's designed. And I think we should all move away from that. So, man, I would love to fix that. I don't see it fixing them because we keep voting for the people,
Well,
even though they don't do
yes,
anything.
and that it happened. It happened with Obama in Syria. He was like, "Hey, I'm going to put it to Congress to vote.
Hmm.
If they vote that I should do this, then I'll do it." And like because everybody criticized him for like, I got a red line.
Lines. You got the red lines.
They
Yeah.
passed the red line. So and you remember like we had the authorized use of military force, the AUMF, that was passed like right after 9/11. And we hung everything on the AUMF. We hung like Somalia,
For a long time.
Yemen,
Yeah.
like Libya. We're like, oh, these guys are associated with Al Qaeda. Like, boom, like that's it. So like we're just like 20 years later, we're like justifying kinetic action based on this thing. And we're like, okay, they're like, this guy tweeted in support of Al Qaeda, so they're like affiliated with Al Qaeda. You know what I mean? Like it was a very like tenuous legal connection that we drew, but that's what we did for the first 20 years after 9/11.
Congress didn't check it. They didn't stop the military from doing it. They kind of seem to encourage the military to keep doing it. Like, well, just keep using the authority that you have under this. Just keep working with that one. It's fine. It's fine. Like, it's kind of like passing the budget. Like, look, man, if you can't pass a budget and you can't like justify or I guess fund or do not fund a military effort, at some point you're like, what are you doing? And this is all Congressmen, right? This is the entire apparatus needs to do this. This is not politically charged one way or the other, but that's the legislative function. If we're not doing it, then, oh man, we should all be disappointed in that.
What was the thing? Do you remember the thing in like 2011, I think it was, where Congress set up this like guillotine for themselves, where they're like, if we don't pass anything by a certain date, there's just going to be like a universal cut of everything. I can't remember what the name of this like thing was, but it was basically like they set up like a guillotine for themselves. And then at the end of the day, they didn't vote for anything. So it was like, it went into effect and it was like a 10% cut on domestic spending and military spending. But like there was nobody's like fingerprints on it. It was like I'm like, oh, this is a thing of beauty because like you can't point to anybody and say it's your fault that we cut, 10% of Social Security or the military. It's like, it was everybody's decision.
I remember that. It was supposed to be like the completely unreasonable ultimatum. Like, well, we would never allow this to happen. And so we'll go ahead and set the conditions and then surely we'll find a solution. It'd be like,
yes,
I don't know what the equivalent is. It's the equivalent of dad saying like, if y'all don't be quiet 5 minutes, I'm going to drive into oncoming traffic. And you're like, all right, we're doing it. We're driving into oncoming traffic. We're just going to do this. And it was just one more of those bizarre, like, wait, what? Yeah. It's like the shutdown game that we play every X months. You're like, we're going to shut it all down. We're going to just like go to Ghostbusters, the government. And you're like, is this really the best we could do? I guess it is. I guess it's all we got.
Yeah.
Just, oh man.
Man, I can't think of the name of it. I just like, but it just goes back to what you're saying about like, Congress is just not taking their Article 1 responsibilities, like, to the extent that they need to. And it's just because they're being they'll get punished by the system, right? So we're getting what we deserve, based on the population. We punish people when they
we're getting what we vote for. Right? I mean, we just keep voted in. Now we came dangerously close to talking politics just then. Now I think foreign policy maybe we can get away with because we're both military people. We got to talk about military stuff. That was pretty close to violating our no politics discussion. That was close.
Ostensibly, foreign policy is supposed to stop at the water's edge, or our politics is supposed to stop at the water's edge, I should say, so that, foreign policy we can speak of in a bipartisan fashion.
I'm going to offer you this. What if I said that I think every foreign policy decision America's made in the last 2 decades has been fundamentally made for domestic consumption? Like, actually, our foreign policy is only, our foreign policy decisions are exclusively to drive voting in whichever election is coming next. And it doesn't appear to have any rhyme or reason past that. What do you think? Am I way off there? Is it, do we have foreign policy, or are we just making things that we hope will win us the next election?
Well, I think we have America.
That's hyperbole.
We have America, the empire, and then we have America, the nation state. And I think those are like two different things. So like as as America the empire, we're making decisions to secure the global commons for trade, for commerce. We're obviously using our defense budget to protect Europe under the umbrella, so that they're able to spend that money on beautiful social programs. So like America the empire, we're like casting our big like whoopee blanket over the world in service of that, and we're beneficiaries. Like our companies are beneficiaries of that system. But
The dollar is the
then you
reserve
get
currency, right? Yeah.
yes. And then you get like the other side of that argument where it's like, we have like, I mean, have you seen like the homeless encampments in like DC, San Francisco, wherever it is? It's like, we have this, we have our own problems, like in America, the nation state, that we're not addressing, but we're paying, billions to these foreign, to export security to these like foreign areas. So, I mean, yes and no, I guess, to your question. I guess I don't know if I totally agree with your hyperbolic question that posed there. I think like we have America the empire that we're trying to prop up, but then the alternative is like, let's focus on America, the nation.
You're probably right. I'm sure it's hyperbole. I just get a little cynical sometimes when we look at the things we do and the seemingly arbitrary nature of them. But I'm sure you're right. There's some rhyme or reason there, right? Some? Yeah. There's some rhyme or reason? A little bit? Touch?
I mean, I think it's the incentive to create, I don't know who, like, you got different writers that talk about this stuff, but like the managerial state, we definitely have a consensus to kind of run things, a similar way. And you see some convergences between like elites in, Europe and the United States in terms of like how we should exercise power abroad. But there's not like there's not a unanimous consensus on that between domestically, like the elites that we have domestically. So going into Turchin and like elite overproduction, we've got a bunch of elites that like aren't necessarily bought into like the kind of cosmopolitan world consensus that like others have.
Yeah. There's a lot of problems there. That's what made the Russian Revolution, right? Let's not do that. Let's not go that way.
No, absolutely.
Once again, Adam, I'm looking at the clock. We failed to make it to episode 0. I believe that at this point it's a conspiracy by you to ensure that we never make it to episode 0. I'm throwing that accusation out there. Just throwing the gauntlet.
I definitely, yes. I'm not into talking about it. I mean, I would like to know about you. I could know more about Dan.
Don't turn this around.
I can see that.
Don't turn this around. Don't turn this around, Adam.
I could, yeah. We can
anyway, we'll get there, man. I mean, hey, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe we'll be in World War III next week and we won't get to it again. So maybe we're in World War III right now. No, we just didn't even know it. Franz Ferdinand got shot. Didn't even know it happened yet. So hopefully not.
Yeah, he's still, we don't, it's still developing. But it's going to be a crazy decade.
It sure is, man. It sure is.